Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Boraleashe, Lord of the North Wind, by A.E. Villa, narrated by Troy Duran. Prologue. Notellus. The end of a season. "Father, are you expecting someone?" Theodor asked at the first notes of the herald's trumpets announcing a visitor to their realm. "No," Notellus frowned. A gust of frigid wind raced past them, blowing food and napkins off their dining table and across the gleaming floor. Notellus had just enough time to fling his heavy robe around his alpha mate, Dustin, before another powerful surge of cold shot through the courtyards, leaving dishes frosted over and a thin layer of ice in their water goblets. Dustin growled, "Shit, what in the—" "It's okay." Notellus lowered his shield from around them. The temperature dropped to almost freezing, their breath now visible when they spoke. "It's him," Theodor gritted out, leaving the room so fast his guards had to jog to keep up. "It's who?" Dustin rasped, taking in Theodor's anxious reaction. "It's my brother Boraleashe, the Lord of the North Wind," Notellus informed him. "He is here in Tir-an-Fomer." "Brother?" "Well, we're not brothers in the human sense. We are brothers in arms, brothers of the seasons, horsemen. We are not brothers of blood or kinship. We inherited the Titan title from our fathers, but when we came of age to rule, that is when we met the others. I mean, each other." "Does Boraleashe visit often?" Dustin asked. "No, he doesn't." Notellus led them out of his chambers. He didn't know if Boraleashe stayed isolated and never visited because of his furious winds or his frozen heart. "Shouldn't your son be at your side?" Dustin murmured out of the corner of his mouth as they preceded their court toward the palace's foyer. "Yes," Notellus answered between clenched teeth. "Since he is the king now, not me." The guards opened the doors, and Notellus led his royal subjects down the palace stairs and into the grand courtyard. The trumpets sounded again, and gray storm clouds blanketed the sky, causing another dramatic shift in the temperature. Boraleashe appeared in the sky atop his pearl-white stallion, Frostrain, in a mirage of frozen rain and snow. His robe was blizzard white and clasped around his neck with a sable fur collar, his armor shimmering like diamonds. His wind was so cold it sounded like icicles falling on a frozen lake. Boraleashe's court trailed him by ground on their speckled Clydesdales. His viceroy paused in front to make his announcement. "People of Tir-an-Fomer, all hail the Lord of the North Wind, Boraleashe Cavalerie, the last of the horsemen and harbingers of justice, the overseer of the realm of winter and creator of the first frost, Titan and ruler of Tir-an-Amarach, the Arctic world." Boraleashe landed with the full force of his power, sending flurries and ice skating over the warm ground. Notellus's people bowed, then tried not to gawk. Not because Boraleashe was the Titan and lord of an element, but because he was strikingly beautiful. The bottom half of his blizzard-kissed white hair flowed down his back and over the swell of his ass, while the top half was cinched and braided into an intricate pattern that reminded Notellus of a snowflake. The iron gate to the palace grounds was pulled open, and Boraleashe sauntered inside on his impressive stallion. His court stopped a respectable distance away until Boraleashe dismounted and closed the distance between them. Notellus pulled Boraleashe by his forearm into a strong hug, happy, but also a bit bewildered to see him. "Brother, it has been too long," Boraleashe said near Notellus's ear, his voice chilling him. "It has indeed." Notellus released their grip and gestured to Dustin. "Boraleashe, allow me to introduce my—" Boraleashe raised one of his immaculate white gloves. "Word journeys fast through the realms, Notellus. I know who you have chosen as your consort." Boraleashe held his hand out to Dustin. "It is a great honor to meet the Alpha of the Moon Tribe." Dustin gripped Boraleashe's hand. "It's an honor to meet you too, Lord Boraleashe." The nobles bowed and curtsied as Boraleashe made his way down the court, greeting each one. He stopped at the end of the row, his back becoming rigid, the air growing cooler by the second. "Where is he?" Boraleashe stood in front of Notellus. Where is the autumn beauty? I do not know. Of course you do, Boraleashe snarled, his fists clenched at his sides. He should be here, and I take great offense that he is not. It appears you will have to get over it, brother, Notalis growled, refusing to be intimidated in his own home. If I go look for him, he won't like what I do when I find him. Is that why you came here, Boraleashe? To start trouble? Notalis stepped closer. My son made his decision. Accept it. I told you why I'm here. I came to congratulate my brother on his new marriage, and to celebrate the beginning of my season, and the end of yours, Boraleashe said boldly. Chapter 1. Boraleashe, far from home. Boraleashe clenched his jaw tightly, glaring at his brother. It would be a mistake to rile him. Before Boraleashe could send out a frustrated gust of frigid wind to locate who he'd come for, he appeared above him. Theodor floated like a delicate leaf on the warm flow of his south wind, his oversized emerald robe blocking Boraleashe's frost blowing down from the north. Fomer's palace lord stepped forward and announced, Hail, Lord Theodor Cavalerie, King of Fomer and Titan of the South Wind, the treasure of the harvest and all realms. Theodor dropped to the ground in front of him amidst a storm of red and orange leaves. He stood to his full 7 feet, staring Boraleashe in his eyes. By the gods, he's more gorgeous than I remember. Boraleashe didn't voice the compliment, forced to be his usual cold self. Have you no respect? Your tardiness is unappealing and beneath your station. The look Theodor gave him was enough to make Boraleashe forget the rest of his chastisement. The new king stood there smelling like spiced apples and cinnamon in his formal attire and full copper armor. His robe floated majestically on the wind behind him. Theodor inched closer until his chest was pressed against his body hot and solid. His voice was grated, his tone lethal. Since you did not offer me nor my father the courtesy of sending word of your intended visit to my realm, Theodor glared with those piercing hazel eyes, you should be honored by my lateness. Boraleashe concealed his tremor beneath his heavy robe, or at least he hoped he hid it well. To maintain power, Boraleashe reached up and caressed a long lock of Theodor's honey-brown hair, allowing the silky strands to sift through his fingers. You know why I'm here, don't you, Autumn Lord? Theodor's hushed gasp caressed his jaw. His body tensed against him. The tail of his floating robe fell to the ground at his feet. He had to know just what Boraleashe was about to remind him of. Yet still he whispered it into his arctic wind and sent it into Theodor's warm spirit. The snow moon approaches. All was quiet for a long moment, he and Theodor standing close to each other, breathing in anticipation, the dread, and the unknown future. Notalis cleared his throat loud enough to gather his court's attention. It is a great honor to host the Titan of the North here in Tir and Fomer. Come, brother. Notalis pulled Boraleashe's attention away from his son. I will escort you and your court to your quarters myself. Boraleashe gave Theodor the slightest bow in respect and was pleased when he returned the gesture. But Boraleashe hadn't expected Theodor to suddenly push his wind and disappear into the orange sky. He hadn't wanted the treasure to leave so soon, but Boraleashe would be sure to find him later. Time was of the essence. Boraleashe fell in step beside his brother Notalis while their court followed at a respectable distance. He glanced around the palace grounds, taking in the autumn scenery. Fomer was a different world from Tir an Amarach. He observed servants smiling while picking ripened fruit from the trees in the courtyard. He wondered if every task in Fomer, no matter how menial, was an absolute joy to perform. In the Arctic world, Boraleashe's people had to hunt and gather their food, often in treacherous conditions. His brother's people congregated with friends and family, able to roam the vast land free of any danger and threats. Guards and occupants of the palace stopped and bowed when they walked past, and Boraleashe was mindful of being courteous in return, But he was not here for ceremony. He wasn't there for a holiday visit. His life and his land were in danger, and there was but one man who could help him. But his hopes diminished with each step he took through Fomer's colorful paradise. Who would dare want to leave this kingdom for me? Notalis seemed to walk forever to get to the guest quarters. Boraleashe was led up numerous steep stone steps and through halls, decorated with expensive tapestries and paintings of fall landscapes. They weaved in and out of open courtyards full of trees and greenery flourishing under the autumn sun. Boraleashe unclasped the thick sable fur from around his neck and passed it behind him. He didn't know which servant took it. It didn't matter. He was burning up. By the gods, Notalis, how much further? You live in a damn 20-story fortress. We should have flown to my rooms, he complained after turning the 100th corner and heading down another long, well-lit corridor. And does it have to be so goddamn hot in here? You have the sun's heat waves coming in through every opening. Notalis may have thought Boraleashe didn't see him roll his eyes or hear the cursed grumble under his breath, but he did. Right this way, my lord. A slim, handsome man in a sleek black tailcoat hurried ahead of them and gestured toward a set of double doors beyond an overdressed sitting area. Thank you, Boraleashe sighed. Finally. Notalis followed him into the rooms. I hope you will find everything to your satisfaction, Boraleashe. I would have had more accommodations if I had known of your arrival. I'm sure, he muttered. No doubt there would have been sunflowers, apple wine, and fruit baskets galore in his quarters if he had sent word ahead of his arrival, all things that repulsed him. His viceroy, Adresin, went to the balcony that overlooked a majority of the kingdom before he answered Notalis. We don't need much, lord. Our court are humble servants. What you have here is more than enough. Boraleashe, this is Aurelian Galis, head of my personal staff. He will see to your every need while you are in Fomer. Boraleashe responded to the deep bow Aurelian gave before he stood with his spine straight and his hands clasped behind his back. Is there anything I can provide for you at this moment, my lord? Boraleashe undid the first couple of buttons at the neck of his tunic. Yes, there is. He pointed to the massive stone fireplace that looked as though it had just been lit, the blaze heating the room to an unlivable temperature. I need you to extinguish the gateway to Hades' underworld over there. And please be sure that none of my ales or teas contain even a drop of pumpkin or cinnamon. Aurelian bowed again, a slight grin tilting one side of his thin lips when he answered, Of course, lord. Notalis came toward him. I would hate for you to be uncomfortable in this climate, Boraleashe. How long will you be gracing us with your presence? The annoyance in Notalis's voice was evident, but at least his brother was being courteous enough to host him, regardless of Boraleashe's manners and rudeness. Rest assured, lord, our stay will be brief, Adresin answered for him, his soft voice dripping with kindness. How brief, Notalis retorted, and Boraleashe could feel his brother's eyes boring into his back. Until I have what I've come for. Boraleashe struggled to keep his temper in check. Adresin touched Boraleashe lightly on his shoulder, a gentle reminder to remember their mission, but he chose that moment to ignore the warning. Leave us, Notalis, Boraleashe asserted, not asking. Knowing it would be considered disrespectful, Boraleashe jerked hard on his wind from the north and sent it hurtling into the room with a powerful enough surge that made Notalis shield himself with his robe before the doors to Boraleashe's chambers slammed shut. Adresin threw him a furious glare. You won't earn Notalis's understanding by disrespecting him in his own home, nor will he advocate for you to his son. Boraleashe didn't watch his viceroy turn his back on him and walk away. Fuck. His most trusted confidant was right. They had come to the realm of autumn with a grave purpose, and if Boraleashe didn't fight harder, they'd leave empty-handed, and his kingdom would be doomed. It was attempting the impossible. He knew it, but he had to try. If the curse only affected him, Boraleashe would have said his goodbyes to his kingdom and died with dignity long ago. But he wouldn't let his people suffer from his own stubbornness. The snow moon demon wouldn't have been strong enough to curse him if Boraleashe's core hadn't lacked love, leaving it vulnerable. He should have known better to try to cheat the gods of fate. In his defense, he'd been trying to protect his fragile heart. He wasn't like Notalis and Zephyrali. Boraleashe wasn't like any other Titan. He didn't wear his heart on his sleeve or give it away as eagerly as the others because it was too dangerous, too risky. Yet he was still mandated by the universe to gift his heart to another, risky or not, and he'd refused. For more than a millennium, Boraleashe chose to shelter and hide it instead, avoiding life by fighting war after war and battle after battle. For good reason. Boraleashe was a descendant of the Icefall lineage and firstborn son to the Titan of the Winter Heart, which meant Boraleashe possessed a love that was incomparable to all. A winter heart so powerful and consuming it could almost be too much for one to receive. And for any reason, if it was ever to get broken, Boraleashe would suffer a misery far more excruciating than the snow moons. But the universe had called upon him again. Boraleashe was out of time. He must either honor the gods for being blessed as an elder with dominion over an element, or be judged. Now that Boraleashe was cursed, his soul unable to feel, his core impotent, his odds had doubled. He'd have to have blind faith in the one he allowed in. With my winter heart. How, gods? Chapter 2. Theodor. Must the gods be so cruel? Theodor practically dove inside his bedchambers and skidded to a clumsy stop. He panted to catch his breath, yanking his robe from around his shoulders and tossing it somewhere near his wardrobe. He paced back and forth, knocking into furniture and tripping over his own feet. Theodor was far more graceful than he appeared, but Boraleashe's sudden presence had him off-kilter and flustered. It had been almost 100 years since he'd last seen Boraleashe, but somehow he had more effect on him now than he did almost a century ago. Theodor yelled for his servants with parched lips and a dry throat. When no one came, he stormed across the room to his drinking cart and poured himself a large goblet of ginger-infused water. He downed the drink in a few gulps and was pouring himself another when his best friend and personal servant, Mosrath, sauntered into the room without a care in the world. He leaned against the door to Theodor's chambers and watched him with amusement. "You see something funny, Mose?" Theodor growled. "Well, Boraleashe is everything you described him to be. He looks like a god, not a Titan. He's tall as fuck, same height as you, which is quite difficult. And you were right. His hair does look like a blanket of fallen snow. And shit, did you see his ass?" Theodor spit his mouth full of water all over the window he'd been staring out of. Mosrath smirked. "But you failed to mention that you gave him your heart." Theodor slammed his glass down on the windowsill and spun to face the half-demon side of Mosrath that knew just how to get under his skin. "Who the hell told you that?" Theodor snapped. Mosrath shrugged. "Was just observing." "Well, I observed that I'm pouring my own damn drink while my servant stands there and watches. You are my personal aide. You're supposed to be at my side at all times." Mosrath sucked his teeth at him, then instructed one of the many aides under his supervision to prepare Theodor a stronger cocktail. His friend began to remove his dress armor, not saying anything else until Theodor was in comfortable clothing, with a spiked ale in his hand. "If you didn't insist on flying everywhere, then your aides would be at your side to provide you with what you need," Mosrath chuckled under his breath. "You're still laughing." Theodor dropped his forehead into his palm. "Did the rest of my court have a hearty laugh at my expense as well?" "No." Mosrath joined him in his sitting room. "Everyone held in their guffaw when you shot into the air like you had Shackley's ants in your trousers." "By the gods," Theodor groaned. "What am I going to do, Mose?" "I think you should start with being honest with yourself. What is going on between you and the Titan of the Arctic world? It's rumored his heart no longer beats, that it's frozen." Theodor kept his head in his palms, his mind going back to that night all those years ago. A century was no time for an immortal, a blip in their lifespan. But Theodor had felt each day since then as fresh as the first. Mosrath touched his shoulder, and Theodor sighed at the peace his friend tried to project toward his confused spirit. But it didn't work. Mosrath's demon half was stronger than the angel in him. He had light and darkness, inside and out, and his demon side would often win in his moral battles. Mosrath was more apt to provoke Theodor rather than to appease him, and over time Theodor had come to respect that. He needed honesty and bravery in his close circle. He had a vast court that handled the business he ordered, but he was the king now, and finding someone who didn't kiss his ass for position or power had been hard to come by. Mosrath had been cast out of the unseelie realm. It was forbidden for certain species to mate, and when they did, it was often their offspring that took the punishment. That was how he and his friend met well before Theodor even began his warrior training. Mosrath may have had demon tendencies, but Theodor could not have wished for a truer friend or a more loyal servant. He told Mosrath bits and pieces of the truth when he and his father had returned from traveling to the Arctic world to conduct business with Boraleashe. Theodor didn't know how to tell anyone that the first time he'd met his father's war brother of the North, he'd made a complete fool of himself.
"Tell me, Theo," Mosrath prodded. "What happened between the two of you when you went to Amarok?"
Theodor jolted at the vivid memories of the ice castle, the chill he felt clear to his bones, and Boraleashe's cool palm on his heated skin. Theodor closed his eyes and swore he was back there. "When my father and I visited Boraleashe, he was not in a good way." Theodor frowned. "We didn't know what exactly was happening, but I remember it was the night of the snow moon, a time where the ice lands are susceptible to all kinds of magic and omens."
"But is Boraleashe not the Titan of the North? Can't he protect his land from such sorcery?"
Mosrath asked. "He tried to spare his kingdom," Theodor grimaced, remembering finding Boraleashe on his knees, deep in the woods, during a raging blizzard, begging the snow moon to show him mercy.
"Spare them from what?"
"From famine and strife."
"But—"
Mosrath looked confused. "A Titan's heart is the nucleus of their kingdom, Mos. We must fall in love. There's no avoiding it." Theodor went to the balcony and stared down at the happy people of Fomer. Their lands were full of light and prosperity, a result of Notalis' newfound love. The Titan of the South was content and recently wed. The realm of autumn would be at its most affluent.
"I know, my friend."
Mosrath stood close to his side, always on his left, so Theodor had a view of the angelic half of his face, the side that was smooth, with creamy alabaster skin and soft blonde hair. The other half was marred with scars and a swath of jet-black hair covering his one black pupil. "I saw him in those woods, vulnerable and pleading. So unlike a Titan, so very unlike Boraleashe, and something strange pulled at my chest." Theodor clutched his hand over his heart. "I couldn't stop the pulsing I felt right here. Panic and exhilaration slammed into me so hard that it knocked me off my feet. I sat there on that freezing ground, staring in shock, overtaken with chills and desire." Mosrath's different-colored eyes widened so large, Theodor thought they'd bulge out of his skull.
Did you give your heart to him?"
Theodor gave a single nod, nothing more, because there was never an explanation when the universe spoke. Their kind of love happened when fate deemed it so.
"And what happened?"
Mosrath prodded. He turned to face his friend, hoping his face was impassive and his voice unfazed. "What do you think? He rejected my love like an idiot, leaving his core defenseless. And the snow moon demon cursed him and Amarok." Mosrath shook his head.
"Not possible. If you touched Boraleashe's heart, he can't deny you. He'd suffer greatly."
Mosrath clasped Theodor on his shoulder, gazing into his eyes.
"And you would too."
Theodor eased away from the comfort and went back inside his chambers. His space had been cleaned, and even the floors looked polished. Theodor had never seen Mosrath clean or lift a finger to mop a floor or fluff a pillow. His best friend used his magic for mundane tasks like those.
"That's why you've procrastinated on naming a consort?"
Mosrath ran his hand over the dark, shorn hair at the nape of his neck on his right side.
"I can't believe you withheld something this big for so long. You are the king of the Autumn Realm now. You can no longer think like a prince." I didn't want you trying to fix it by casting some spell on me. God damn you, Theo. You have great responsibilities now. Your Titan heart cannot be held hostage somewhere. Mosrath sighed. I could have helped you. I could have gone to Amarach and demanded an explanation from Lord Boraleashe. I think he had a good reason for what he did. Something scared the fuck out of him, but I've yet to discover what it was. Maybe that's why he's here now, to explain. A blossom of hope formed in Theodor's chest before it faded as quickly as it had come. He's here for one reason. And what's that? Time is up. It's been 100 years and the snow moon is returning, and Boraleashe still has not opened his heart for another. Or me. He's here to say goodbye. Theodor left his friend outside his bedchambers and closed the door. Chapter 3. Theodor. Respect is earned. Theodor sat at his desk, staring at the same paperwork for 2 hours, his mind 1,000 miles away. He still couldn't believe that Boraleashe was under the same roof as him. There would be no way to avoid him. Perhaps he could stay in his quarters for the remainder of his visit. Oh, or he could say that he had important matters that required him to travel right away. Yeah, he could just leave. Theodor opened his mouth to call for Mosrath to aid him in packing when his friend tapped on the door. My lord, I have word from your father. Come inside. Theodor waited until Mosrath closed the door behind him before he asked, What word? Mobilenta illumiatio. Mosrath chanted, his eyes glowing white, a split second before Theodor's wardrobe doors opened and several pieces of his ceremonial attire appeared on the bench at the foot of his bed. Your father is going to escort Boraleashe and his court around the realm and has insisted that you join them. But Theodor leapt from his chair. I was just about to notify the court that I'm going on a trip to... There's no traveling on your schedule for the remainder of the month. Mosrath paused in his duties, eyeing him with suspicion. Theodor cleared his throat. I just added it today. You probably didn't see the change, and I thought you learned by now that it's pointless to lie to a demon. Yes? Mosrath chuckled. I can taste the lies from your tongue on the air, Lord. Theodor ground his molars to keep from cursing at his friend. He drove his hand through his hair for the 100th time, pulling at the tangles he'd caused. Mos, I can't do this. I can't just stroll through the towns with Boraleashe like nothing happened between us. Did something else happen? Mos asked while he continued to put together one of Theodor's finer tunics. The ensemble was appropriate for meeting a betrothed, not for an afternoon stroll. Theodor slouched in his chair, letting out a loud, defeated sigh. Only Mosrath would ever hear him moan and complain or show a single shred of weakness. There is more. Theodor closed his eyes and allowed his mind to be taken back to the most precious memory in his short 1,091 years in this world. Boraleashe had almost let me in. He didn't reject me right away, not until first light came. Before then, we had the night, a fierce storm that we'd weathered together. Theodor lowered his voice, letting a chill sweep over him. I'd gone to Boraleashe when he'd been on his knees, Mos. I knelt with him and wrapped my robe around us. I summoned as much autumn heat as possible and held him as tight as I could. And he'd held me back like his life depended on it. Theodor shivered in remembrance. By the gods, Mosrath, his beautiful pale skin was so cold that it burned to touch him. You were in a blizzard, and Boraleashe didn't stop it. Mosrath's gritty voice sounded far away while Theodor was trapped in the memory. No, he couldn't stop it, Theodor answered solemnly. Not on that night. We are powerful titans, Mos, but not more so than the moon or the sun. So I just held him in my arms, warmed him, and the storm eased. Mosrath whispered a quick spell to heat Theodor's wash basin while he kept talking about that fateful night. But in the earliest hours of the morning, when the moon was kissing the night goodbye, something made Boraleashe pull away. I still don't know what caused the panic, but all I know is he wanted away from me, and I refused to let him go.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?